The notification lit up Maya's phone at exactly 6:47 a.m. Just 3 words. "I'm so sorry." She stared at the message, her coffee growing cold in her hands. It was from David. David, who had disappeared without a trace 6 months ago. David, who she thought was gone forever. And now, somehow, impossibly, he was reaching out from Damascus, Syria, a city that had just been freed after decades of darkness. Let me take you back to where this all began. Maya Rodriguez was a data analyst for a humanitarian organization in New York City. Not the glamorous kind of job that makes headlines, but the kind that matters, tracking refugee movements, analyzing crisis patterns, helping people who had nowhere else to turn. David Chan was a photojournalist, the kind who couldn't walk past injustice without documenting it, the kind who believed a single image could change the world. They met at a gallery opening in Brooklyn, where his photos from conflict zones lined the walls like windows into worlds most people refused to see. She was drawn to the photo of a child in rubble, holding a flower. He was drawn to the woman who stood in front of it for 20 minutes, tears streaming down her face. "That was taken in Aleppo," he said softly, appearing beside her. "I know," she replied. "I've been tracking the displacement data from that region for 3 years. Every number in my spreadsheets has a face, but I never see the faces. Until now." They talked until the gallery closed. Then they talked at a diner until 3 in the morning. And then they kept talking for 6 months straight. David made Maya see the human stories behind her data. Maya helped David understand the patterns behind the chaos he photographed. They balanced each other perfectly, her analytical mind and his empathetic heart, her need for stability and his hunger for truth. But on June 4th, David left for Syria. "Just 2 weeks, he promised, kissing her goodbye at JFK Airport. "There are rumors something big is building. I need to be there when it breaks. Be careful," she whispered, holding him tighter than usual. "Always am," he grinned. He wasn't. 2 weeks became 3. 3 became 4. His messages grew sporadic, then stopped altogether. His last text, sent on June 27th, read, "Following a lead. Phone dying. Love you." Maya reported him missing. She contacted every journalist organization, every embassy, every human rights group. She analyzed satellite data, cross-referenced news reports, tracked every Syrian conflict development. For 6 months, she built a digital map of his possible locations, each pen a prayer that he was still alive. Her friends told her to move on. Her therapist told her to grieve. But Maya couldn't accept that someone she loved could simply vanish into the chaos of war. And then, on December 8th, everything changed. The news broke just after dawn. Syrian President Assad had fled to Moscow. The regime that had stood for 61 years, the government that had suffocated Syria in fear and violence, had collapsed overnight. Maya watched the celebrations flood her screens, people dancing in Damascus streets, prisoners emerging from underground cells, families reuniting after decades of forced separation. And somewhere in that chaos, David was alive. His message came through an aid worker's satellite phone. Just those 3 words. "I'm so sorry." Maya's hand shook as she typed back, "Where are you?" The response took 47 agonizing minutes. Damascus. Assad's prison. Underground cell. 5 months. Phone confiscated first week. Tried everything to contact you. Thought I'd die here. Maya, I'm so sorry. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think. Her brilliant, analytical mind simply stopped functioning as waves of relief. Rage, love, and grief crashed over her simultaneously. He was alive. He had been in a Syrian prison for 5 months. He was alive. She called every contact she had. The U.S. Embassy in Jordan, the International Red Cross, journalist protection organizations. But in the chaos of liberation, nobody could guarantee when or if journalists could be evacuated safely. Syria was still a war zone, still fragmenting into territorial disputes, still dangerous. You have to be patient, an embassy official told her. We're doing everything we can. Patient. She had been patient for 6 months. Patience was a luxury she could no longer afford. Maya emptied her savings account. She contacted a pilot who flew humanitarian missions, a friend of a friend of a colleague, who asked no questions when she offered him $5,000 cash. She packed a bag with medical supplies, protein bars, and a satellite phone. Her sister thought she was crazy. Maya, you can't just fly into Syria. There are Turkish forces, Israeli incursions, remnants of ISIS, and a transitional government that barely has control. You're right, Maya said calmly, zipping her bag. I can't, but I am. The flight into Jordan was smooth. The drive toward the Syrian border was not. Her driver, a local fixer named Rashid, navigated checkpoints and back roads with the ease of someone who had spent his entire life adapting to war. Your boyfriend is very lucky, Rashid said as they approached the border crossing. Or very stupid. Maybe both. Definitely both, Maya agreed, her heart pounding as Syrian territory came into view. Damascus was nothing like the news footage. Yes, there were celebrations in the city center, people tearing down statues and burning pictures of Assad. But in the neighborhoods they drove through, there was mostly exhaustion, people simply trying to process that the nightmare that had defined their lives for decades was finally over. The former prison was a maze of underground passages, now flooded with aid workers and journalists documenting the horrors. Maya showed David's photo to everyone she encountered. Finally, a young volunteer nodded. The journalists are in the East Wing. Many were released 2 days ago, but some stayed to help identify others. Look for the man with the camera. He hasn't stopped taking pictures since he got out. Maya ran down corridors lit by harsh LED work lights, past cells so small she couldn't imagine a human fitting inside, past walls covered in scratched messages, desperate prayers in a dozen languages, past horrors that would haunt her forever. And then she saw him, thinner, bearded, holding his camera like a lifeline, photographing a wall where prisoners had marked the days of their captivity. He didn't notice her at first, too focused on his work, on documenting this moment for history. David, he turned. The camera fell from his hands, dangling by its strap. For a moment they just stared at each other across the dim corridor, both wondering if this was real or another dream in a long series of nightmares. Then he moved. So did she? They collided in the middle of the hallway, holding each other so tightly that breathing became impossible, and neither cared. You came, he whispered into her hair. You actually came. You thought I wouldn't? She pulled back, tears streaming down her face. You disappear for 6 months, get thrown in a Syrian prison, and think I'm just going to wait in New York? I hoped you'd moved on, found someone who doesn't. She kissed him, cutting off the self-recrimination she could hear building in his voice. Shut up, just shut up and hold me. So he did. Later, in a tent city set up by international aid organizations, David told her everything. He had been investigating reports of mass graves when Assad's secret police arrested him. They took his phone, his passport, his camera equipment. They threw him in a cell designed for punishment, not detention. For 5 months he lived in darkness, let out only for interrogations. That yielded nothing because he knew nothing. He was just a journalist trying to tell the truth. There were days I thought I'd never see you again, he said, staring at his hands. Days I thought about what you'd do when you realized I was gone. Days I hoped you'd forget me and be happy. Well, I didn't, Maya said firmly. I tracked every lid, analyzed every data point, and built a probability map of where you might be. I knew you were in Damascus. I just didn't know how to reach you. Of course you did. He smiled a real smile for the first time. You and your data. Me and my data just saved your life. No, he took her hand. You saved my life. The data was just your weapon of choice. They spent 3 days in Damascus. David documented the liberation, the opened prisons, the recovered bodies, the families reunited after decades of separation. Maya helped coordinate aid distribution, using her analytical skills to identify the neighborhoods most in need. At night, they lay together in a tent, listening to the sounds of a city learning to breathe freely for the first time in generations. I'm done, David said on their 3rd night. No more conflict zones. No more disappearing into war zones. I can't do this to you again. Maya was quiet for a long moment. Don't make promises you can't keep. I'm serious. I know you are, right now. But in 3 months, when there's another crisis, another story that needs telling, you'll go. Because that's who you are. She propped herself up on her elbow, looking at him in the dim light. And I won't ask you to change that. But next time you take me with you. What? I've spent 6 months analyzing data from a distance, feeling helpless. Being here, seeing the people behind the numbers, actually helping, this is what I should have been doing all along. So next time, we go together. You document the story. I help coordinate the relief efforts. We're a team. David stared at her. You hate flying. You like stability and schedules and knowing what's going to happen next week. I did. She lay back down, her head on his chest. But I learned something these past 6 months. The things worth having are worth risking everything for. And you're worth the risk. They flew home on December 15th. JFK Airport had never looked so beautiful, sterile, and efficient, and predictable, and safe. Maya's sister met them at arrivals, hugging them both so hard David's ribs ached. The world had kept spinning while they were gone. Christmas decorations filled the streets. People complained about holiday shopping and traffic and ordinary, beautiful, mundane problems. David had been named in Trump's Time Person of the Year coverage, one of the journalists who had risked everything to document the truth. His photos from Damascus were being exhibited at the same Brooklyn gallery where they'd met. But more importantly, they were home, together. On Christmas Eve, David took Maya back to that gallery. His new collection lined the walls, images from the Syrian liberation, from the prisons, from the celebrations. But the centerpiece was different. It was a photo of Maya, taken with a borrowed phone in Damascus. She was in the tent city, crouched down beside a young girl, showing her something on a tablet, probably a map or data visualization, knowing Maya. The girl was smiling. So was Maya, and the light was perfect. Golden hour sun filtering through the tent fabric, illuminating both their faces with hope. The title card read, "The Distance Between Data and Love." "When did you take this?" Maya asked, staring at the image. "The second day. You were so focused on helping that you didn't notice me. But I saw it at the moment when you stopped seeing refugee statistics and started seeing people. The moment when the numbers became faces." He took her hand. "That's when I knew." "Knew what?" "That I want to spend the rest of my life taking pictures of you seeing people. That I want every adventure, every crisis, every story we cover to have you beside me. That I want to marry you and build a life where we're both chasing truth and helping people and never, ever taking for granted that we have each other." He pulled a small box from his pocket. Inside was a simple silver ring. "I bought this from a jeweler in Damascus with the last of my emergency cash. It's probably not the proposal you imagined." "Yes, and I know we should talk about logistics and weight, yes?" "Yes." Maya laughed, tears streaming down her face again. Happy tears this time. Yes to all of it. The adventures, the risks, the life, the marriage, everything. Yes. He slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. They were married on New Year's Eve in a small ceremony in Central Park, surrounded by friends and family. Maya wore a simple white dress. David wore the same shirt he'd worn the night they met. Their vows were brief but honest promises to show up for each other, to be brave together, to never let distance or danger silence their connection. As midnight approached and fireworks began to illuminate the sky, Maya pulled out her phone and opened a new document. She titled it, "Stories Worth Telling, 2025 and Beyond." The first entry, "David and Maya, two people who learned that love isn't about safety or certainty. It's about showing up, even when the world is falling apart. Especially when the world is falling apart." David looked over her shoulder and smiled. "Are you analyzing our relationship now? Someone has to keep track." She kissed him as the crowd around them counted down to midnight. "Besides, I have a feeling we're going to need good documentation for all the adventures ahead." The clock struck 12. The new year began. And somewhere in Damascus, in a city learning to rebuild itself after decades of darkness, a young girl looked at a photo on a borrowed photo of a woman and a journalist who had traveled across the world for love. She smiled and made a wish that someday someone would cross the world for her too. Because that's what stories do. They ripple outward, touching lives we'll never know, inspiring hopes we'll never see. David's photographs would tell the world about Syria's liberation. Maya's data would help rebuild communities. But their love story would remind people of something even more important. That in a world full of chaos and crisis, the most revolutionary act is choosing to show up for another person. Again and again and again,